All right, hello everyone, and welcome to this new video by Arboreal Audio. Um, what I want to talk about today is some changes to the way that we are licensing software. What that refers to is whenever you use software, there's this contract that you basically not implicitly agree to. You usually explicitly agree to it when you download something and install it or use it. There's usually something in the installer or in the you get prompted or something, and it says that by using this software you agree to these terms. And sometimes they're fine and basically innocuous, although it usually means that you can't really do anything with the software and there's certain restrictions on how you can use it. uh, and sometimes they're basically straight up evil. um, Everyone famously knows the extremely long terms of service for the iPhone updates or Apple, whatever Mac OS updates. But what I want to talk about are the changes to our licensing agreements, and why it's important. And it is pretty important, just as far as, I don't know, what I'm doing is not incredibly important, but just um, as far as the landscape of software in general, I think it is pretty important to try and abide by certain principles. And so that was sort of behind some of these changes. If you want to read more about it, there is a post on the website about it, um, called "On the Choice to Release Free Asterisk Software." And by free, I mean in the sort of GNU way, which is free as in freedom. I'm not making all the plugins free. The paid plugins are still licensed. You still purchase a license key for the plugin. But what's changed is that the plugins are now released under the GPL license. And that doesn't really mean anything different if you're just a user of the software, especially if you're not a software developer, you don't know anything really about, programming and licenses for software and stuff. It may not make a big difference to you. And that's fine, but it does mean that you really have the right to do whatever you want with the software. And you're not really encumbered by a proprietary license anymore. Uh, so what this means is that you can now view the source code for Pimax. This is not actually a stipulation of the GPL license. I don't have to make the source code publicly available, but I am choosing to, because I just think that makes it easier. And if anyone is interested in contributing to the development of it, here it is, publicly available. And so you can compile it yourself if you want. So the reason that I'm still allowing you to purchase a license is basically just to sort of keep in place that kind of, I don't know what you would call it, like a standard or I want to keep in place the idea that, like, this is software that I do think you should pay for. I spent a lot of time working on it. I do think it provides a decent amount of value, and it's still kind of underpriced for what it is. I think it's a pretty fair and competitive price, especially now that you can actually read and modify the source code if you want, which I do think is a pretty valuable thing. um, but there's this idea that if something is open source, it has to be free, as in not cost any money. And I don't really think there's any reason that has to be true. And in fact, I think there's a lot of things that are open source that, like, you probably should pay for. Um, Certain things, it kind of makes more sense for it to be free. It reduces a lot of, there's so many less people would use certain stuff if it wasn't free. But something like an audio plugin, where it's being used for like, music production, often by people who don't have, who are not like tech, who are not super tech savvy. They don't know how to program. They probably don't know how to compile source code. By buying a license, you're basically skipping all of that stuff. I mean, that's if you know how to load a plugin into a DAW and use it, but you don't know how to compile source code, that's like a full day of like learning how to compile stuff and getting all the tools set up so you can do that. I think that's worth $25. I would pay that if I didn't know how to do this. So yeah, I think there's no reason that it needs to be free, as in not costing any money. Another option that we now have, though, is that you can support through Coffee. We have one subscription tier that's $5 a month. You get all of the plugins now and in the future. And yeah, I mean, I think that's, pretty solid option if you are convinced that what we're doing is going to continue to be of value to you. If not, though, you can still just buy a license one time. There's no longer any limit on activations. So you buy it and you get a license key, and that key will work forever. Forever is that's a big word. I shouldn't say that because, you never know what will happen with the whole computer thing. It might just be kind of a flash in the pan. You never know. But yeah, so this is open source. OmniAmp is, it's not letting me click. Okay. OmniAmp is, same thing. STRX was always open source, but now it's sort of is joined by the other plugins who are sort of embarrassingly languishing under proprietary licenses. Yeah, and one thing I did want to talk about too is with this whole proprietary software thing. You also end up running into this thing called DRM, or copy protection, or some way of sort of trying to prevent piracy. It never works. I knew that it really doesn't work, and yet I still tried to implement DRM in these plugins, and I tried to make it as unintrusive as possible. I tried to make it very simple. I didn't want to do iLock or any of that, malware. And still, it's like it doesn't really work. There's always going to be bugs. There were bugs just today with involving activation, and I hope that the process of buying a license is still pretty smooth, or as smooth as possible, and it's no longer you can continue to use the plugin pretty much indefinitely, even if you don't have a license. I basically am now following sort of the like Reaper philosophy, where it just sort of prods you to buy a license. And it's not that it locks you down and locks you out of using the plugin if you don't have a license. Because it's not going to make anyone's life better. If the activation process is broken for someone, if there's a bug, that becomes immoral. It becomes like theft, basically, on my part. I'm taking money for a product that doesn't work. And ironically, it doesn't work because of the process of validating that they paid for it, which is just, there's something about that that's just very kind of nasty. So I don't want to continue doing that anymore. I will not continue doing that in the future. I think this is going to be a pretty good model moving forward. And there's some other things too with the licenses for some of the software libraries that are used to build plugins. If you don't know anything about like software development or plugin development, this might be kind of unfamiliar and confusing. But there's this library called Juice that is kind of the main library everyone uses to build the plugins. It allows you to sort of build in all the formats for all the different operating systems. It is a very nice sort of way of kind of, it glosses over and takes care of a lot of the uh, complex technical details for you. So you can kind of just focus on the sort of core of the plugin that you're building. And I don't want to license the proprietary juice license anymore. And so what they have is the option for a dual license where you can either pay for their sort of official, proprietary license or whatever it is, or you can license it as GPL software. And so that's what I am doing. There were some changes made to the licensing agreement with Juice that were kind of controversial. If you're a plugin developer, you probably have heard about that. I think they've done a bit to sort of ramify that. I mean, they were responding to a lot of people's issues. It's mainly stuff to do with if you have a company and you have Juice license for the company, but then you have contractors, do they need to have their own license, or can they use yours, or do you need to buy a license for them? Or if someone is making art assets and they don't touch the actual Juice part of the code, do they need to have a license? And initially they were saying yes. Even people who are making art assets would need to have a Juice license. I think they've kind of revised some of those more controversial points. Nonetheless, it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth, and probably a lot of other developers as well. If you've watched some of my other videos, I've been developing my own framework. So that's going to be, something I'm continuing to invest in going forward. And so, yeah, I mean, going forward, it just makes kind of the most sense for me to just license Juice under the GPL. It's something I just kind of wanted to do for a while. It just lines up with kind of the vision that I've had for, releasing our software under the GPL. And I don't necessarily want to. I'm just a little worried about the direction they might be going in, as far as what sort of terms they're going to be asking developers to sort of consent to, I guess. And the other thing that has sort of a similar setup is the license for VST3 plugins. The VST3 SDK from Steinberg is under a similar set of terms, where let me see if I can just bring it up here. So the VST3 SDK is dual licensed as well, where you can abide by the you can abide by the proprietary Steinberg license, which I'm trying to find the actual license agreement that they want you to sign. Oh, here it is. If you want to, the idea here is that if you are making commercial plugins, you have to sign this. Because otherwise you have to release your plugins as GPL. And so it's this whole thing, and you have to sign, and you have to agree to all these trademarks, or to acknowledge. I don't even know. It's the way that contracts are. There's all this confusing legalese that can be twisted and interpreted in ways that may or may not be charitable to you as the end user of the software. And I think one thing that they've tried to do with these more recent agreements is to, prevent you from using the VST2 SDK. So you can't make VST2 plugins because they don't want people using the objectively superior plugin format that they destroyed by releasing VST3. So yeah, they give you the option to release stuff under the GPL, so I'm releasing stuff under the GPL, and that's pretty much that. I'm not going to sign any sort of contract or license like that. I will not. I don't really think you should if you're a plugin developer, but that's obviously your choice. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much kind of the last sort of reason and thing I wanted to get into with this. But I hope that this sort of leads to a nice, sort of productive and open future for Arboreal Audio and all the plugins that we're doing. And I think making things open source will just be a lot nicer, and there will be a lot less friction, I think, for both myself and anyone who's using the plugins. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope it was interesting, and I'll see you at some point in the future, I guess.